And we're back for another Saturday night study session. Crime Curious is a private study group for crime junkies and law nerds. Kilo says hello. He also wants you to know that he is not the teacher's pet. Because I'm not a teacher. Welcome to it. It is another Saturday night, and let me get my banners up here. Let me add the comments to the screen. Let me get over here in my lane. So I do want to just go ahead and jump in tonight. I don't know. I'm thinking that we're probably going to be here for about an hour. But I want to go ahead and start just with a quick presentation that I put together, and then we'll do kind of an open discussion after. So as you're coming in, please consider joining me on panel. And if you want to, then after we watch the little presentation, then I'll pop you up on the screen. Otherwise, we'll just have conversation with chat. Either way is fine, but I hope that you'll consider joining me up here because it is a study group. And we're doing this together. Looks like Scout is in the house. Hi, Scout. Good to see you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play the little presentation that I put together. It's about 8 minutes, so hopefully that gives people time to come in and get situated and consider joining me on the panel.
In the case of murder, it just led me to think about, what if there was a scientific way of understanding why we kill? Would that change the whole paradigm of the legal system, particularly in terms of death penalty cases? And then, as we got deeper and deeper into this film, I began to think, well, maybe what we're doing is a psychiatric examination of the forces behind the death penalty itself. If we know somebody's insane, why in the world would we execute them? And indeed, if we know that the death penalty itself actually encourages murder rather than acts to discourage it, it seems even more insane.
Really is. But do you think, apropos what Alex said, do you think there's a scientific explanation for why people murder?
Yes.
What is it?
Well, it's not as simple and there are variations of these combinations that seem to create a murderer. I think probably all of us, at one time or another or more, have wanted to kill someone. Have you?
Oh, I so wanted to ask you that. Have you?
Oh, of course.
You have, yeah. Really? I don't know. I learned something. Question.
And I remember as a kid lying in bed at night wondering. What?
Well, give us an example. I'm curious now.
An example would be my sister, who was almost 5 years older than I. And there's a question of whether she was adopted or not. I was not. But I never understood why she really didn't like me. And I used to wonder, what keeps me from killing her? How do I know, some night in my sleep, how do I know I wouldn't do it? And let me tell you, when I first read about parasomnias in which people do kill in their sleep, I thought, oh my God, that it really can happen. But by and large, as maybe a generalization, you could say, to my mind, there's sort of a cocktail or a recipe that comes together that creates a truly violent person, a person who could murder. And it seems to be a combination of the person's intrinsic characteristics of their brain. They may not be born with them. You can be dropped on your head, or you can have encephalitis or whatever. But whenever anything goes wrong with the brain, pretty much, we become paranoid. I mean, if you think of drugs, think of alcohol, think of dementia, whatever. When something is wrong with the brain, we do become paranoid, among other things. Now, in addition to this, see, most of us become that way, and we kind of reason ourselves out of it. But if, in addition to this kind of vulnerability, if you also have been raised in an incredibly abusive, denying, humiliating household, and particularly if you have been grotesquely abused, and very often it's sexually abused. We've been able to trace that to 6 generations in one of our families, but it's kind of the gift that keeps giving. My daughter says, incest, the game the whole family can play, but she says a lot of funny things. Have you ever had the experience of thinking that somebody said something bad about you or about your mother behind your back, and you wheel around ready to kill them, and they say, I didn't say it? That is the best question that you can ask, because it just, well, look, if it lit a fire for you, for a paranoid kid or a psychotic kid, they often mishear something and they think that they are being attacked. But that you mentioned, someone said something about your mother, I assume you were not dropped on your head when you were a child.
It all leads back to childhood. You know, Dorothy is talking about, some kind of damage to the frontal lobe, which could exacerbate these issues. But the real core of where people tend to lose control or of their ability to control their murderous impulses is in childhood, where they're badly abused.
Really, it's total madness. What do you think the true defense of not guilty by reason of insanity should be?
That's not a quick and easy answer. I'm not certain. Let me just blabber a little bit.
Do you have a disregard with the rules here? What's going on here?
I don't think I have a disregard for the rules.
What does crazy, not insane mean?
Crazy, not insane means that there are individuals who have very severe mental illness. Call it crazy, but they are not considered insane because they may not meet the criteria of that particular state or whatever it is, so that they may be crazy as a bedbug, but it does not fit an insanity defense, and the insanity varies, as you know, from state to state, so that you can be quite crazy in one place, but not insane.
So you can commit a murder where there may not be any motive or any reason why that person committed the murder, but yet you could still be legally sane. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think that's what I said, no. People don't believe psychiatrists, and I don't blame them. We do not attract the brightest of the bright, right?
In the Middle Ages in England, they had the death penalty. And the legal system had the view, if somebody had become mad, that madness itself was enough punishment. That's part of the English common law that came with the English colonists to North America. At some point, though, in death penalty cases in the United States, that notion got lost, that madness was punishment enough. And people could be executed despite being very psychotic. And as late as the 1950s, the U.S. Supreme Court had examined a case like that and said that doesn't offend the Constitution. It's not cruel and unusual to do that.
You're competent to be executed if you know what you've been found guilty of and if you know what it is to be executed. That's a pretty low bar, wouldn't you say?
Once you accept the idea that all of us could go there under certain circumstances, that is to say, all of us could become a serial killer if we've been hammered on the head and our prefrontal lobes were damaged and we'd suffered from horrific abuse as children, then you're looking at a different kind of a universe as opposed to the universe of revenge, where you say there's different kinds of people. There's the good people and there's the bad people, and the bad people are going to be executed, and the good people are just going to sit around and have tea.
The good people are going to just sit around and have tea. Okay. All right. So let's see. I think the best thing for me to do now would be to share my screen and go over to my YouTube channel. Let me see. I think I have to add it to the screen. Bear with me. Okay. Make it a little bit bigger there. Okay. So the upcoming live stream obviously is right after this one at 8 p.m. Mountain, where we talk about Kimberly Singler. And then we have a playlist for both of the current cases in Colorado that I'm following. But then all the post-trial stuff is down here. And if you go to the post-trial study group and you look at that full playlist, right now what we have is last week's, which I made public, and I'll make this one public tomorrow. This is where we are now. But beneath that, I have the little video that I made, back in October of 2022 when it was announced that Dorothy Lewis was going to be Letitia's expert witness on her behalf for the defense. And then I have all of Dorothy Lewis's testimony from trial. And I cut out any sidebars or bench conferences. I put it all together, but altogether it's basically 8 hours of material to watch. And I did leave in the part where Judge Werner scolds Dorothy Lewis's son, not directly, without using his name or saying that it was him, but everybody who was in that courtroom, and it wasn't very big, I was in it, could smell weed when he came in the room. It was embarrassing. Anyway, so then the next thing that we have, and these are all public videos. The post-trial study group videos are members only for the first 24 hours, and then they're public. So anyway, we also have Letitia's first sanity exam. Now, that is not with Dorothy Lewis. What we were able to see of the 14-hour sanity exam that Dorothy Lewis performed with Letitia in 2022 and 2023, those are included within her testimony, and we only get to see it on the screen that's behind her in the witness box. But this one down here is the full, everything that we could see at trial from her first sanity exam when she was speaking to doctors that she didn't think were on her team. You know, her team was Josh Tellini, Will Cook, Caitlin Kreck, Dorothy Lewis. This was from the state, even though the state was paying them all. And then everything that I clipped tonight that wasn't trial related came out of this video here by a channel called the 92nd Street Y, New York. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. And it was an hour-long interview that I only took about, 7 or 8 minutes out of. So if you want to watch that whole thing, it's here as well. The only thing that we're missing is the actual documentary, Crazy Not Insane. but it is not free. I purchased my copy on YouTube, but I was working on a writing project. And unless you want to, don't spend the money. Not that you asked me. Anyway, let's see. Let me remove that from the screen. So I just wanted to point out that in that playlist on the homepage on my YouTube channel, there are all of the materials that I'm pulling my information from, with the exception of the documentary and Dorothy Lewis's book, which we're going to get into here in a minute. Let me go back to StreamYard. There I am. Okay. I did pull a couple of pictures. So here's Letitia and her defense team, running down the game plan for their defense during court. So this picture was taken after she was moved, or before she was moved. So initially, she was sitting at the end of the defense table here on the right. But because she did things like flip off witnesses, more than one, during trial, the judge scolded her and moved her in between these two. As much as we talk about Alice in Wonderland in this study group, I just felt like this picture was a cute one because it's sort of reminiscent. And I didn't create this image. I took a screenshot of a video during one of Letitia's pretrial hearings. And it just happened that the screenshot caught her in that exact moment where she had the two faces. And I just felt like it was apropos. And Scout put a link in the chat for the playlist. Thank you, Scout. And then we have Dorothy Lewis, which I thought was the best place to start, because when you look back at Colorado's case against Letitia Stalk, for me, one of the most fascinating pieces was the idea that this expert witness from out of state and some HBO documentary was going to come in and make it so that Letitia Stalk didn't have to go to prison. And so I thought that's where we would start, because to me, it was the most fascinating notion out of all of this. And Letitia had some crazy ideas. The notes that I wrote down, let me see. So first of all, I just wrote down the words death penalty with a question mark. You have to wonder why the defense chose Dorothy Lewis. They reached out to her after having seen this documentary. And I know that Josh Tellini, which was Letitia's main defense attorney, he has a personally and professionally vested interest in mental health as it relates to the criminal justice system. And I know that this is an unpopular opinion, but I actually appreciate him as an attorney. I won't get into how I feel about Will Cook after the snickering and whatever the hell that was they were doing in court. I don't know the man personally, never had a conversation with him. But Josh Tellini really is a well-respected attorney in Colorado Springs. And I don't have it handy, but after the trial, anonymously, he wrote something that hit home with me pretty hard, just about the effect that him being on this case, the effect that had on his career. And it was unfortunate. I hope that his career is not judged by this case, but we're studying this case. And, sometimes they looked like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. It is what it is. Anyway, it's not a death penalty case. It was never a death penalty case. It could have been technically, but the state of Colorado hasn't put anybody to death since the 70s, and they weren't about to do it, start in 2023 after the death penalty was officially repealed in 2020. It just, that wasn't real. So, Dorothy Lewis, who also had a pretty loud career, where she worked really well as an expert witness, I believe, is when the defendant was facing the death penalty. And then her argument about why the offender commits the crimes that they commit, I guess it kind of makes a little bit more sense in that light, because, we're talking about, about the death penalty. But in Letitia's case, it didn't apply. And so I still don't understand why they would put so much emphasis on, why Letitia did what she did. I know that once she had entered that affirmative defense, not guilty by reason of insanity, she was admitting that she did it. The only difference was whether she was going to go to a mental institution or prison. And Letitia Stout still believes that she's too good for prison. So, and I think that she felt like she could really work more people at a mental institution because, then she's a patient and not an inmate. And it just didn't work out in her favor that way. Just like it didn't work out in her favor to murder an 11-year-old little boy who was in her care and custody, who, by the way, Dorothy Lewis, with her scientific brain, referred to over and over during trial as the boy or that boy, or, it's, whenever she was talking about his body, it was always it. She's very scientific. She doesn't believe in evil. She doesn't recognize it as a scientific concept because evil only exists in religious philosophies, not in scientific study. You can't prove that someone is evil. But apparently she believes that you can prove someone is not legally responsible for their actions because they're mentally ill. And, different states have different laws as it relates to the insanity defense. And when Dorothy Lewis came to town for Letitia Stout's trial, she couldn't even recite the rules or the laws, what it says in the state of Colorado, if the defense is that, the defendant is not guilty by reason of insanity. And so, I think that she meant well, but really all of those hours and days of testimony and her showing up late, turning in her paperwork late, sending handwritten notes to a defense attorney who then has someone in his office type up the psychiatric exam. It was a lot. It was a lot. And I think this is probably the last week that we're going to talk about Dorothy Lewis. I'm sure that she'll come up from time to time as we continue through Letitia's case, but I thought it was a good place to start. And there are all of those extra materials and, the documentary if you want it. And especially rewatching the trial where we had Dorothy Lewis's testimony is interesting today. Yesterday and today is when I was watching it again. And, I thought a lot about Nick Reiner, and I thought a lot about Kimberly Singler. And, Kimberly Singler has not pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but I think that's what she's going to do. She doesn't have to answer the charges until after her preliminary hearing, which is currently scheduled for May of 2026. So we don't know for sure, but I don't understand how she would have any other option. I mean, what other defense is there? I think she's cooked. And like Letitia, who was also cooked, it's kind of a last gasp, I'll try anything to stay out of prison thing. And I don't think it's going to work in her defense either. Nick Reiner, on the other hand, I don't know. We just heard Dorothy Lewis talking about how, you have to be able to have the competency to understand on a death penalty case as the defendant that you are going to be put to death if found guilty for the crime you're accused of committing. And, according to, oh, I don't know, I think it was like Entertainment Tonight, which isn't exactly a trusted news source, but that's where I got it. I thought it was a good video. Anyway, I linked it on my community wall on the YouTube channel, and the heading or the title is something like, how Nick Reiner doesn't understand why he's in jail. And anyway, I don't want to get completely derailed by talking about other cases, but it was interesting for me to watch Dorothy Lewis's testimony and now read Dorothy Lewis's book and go back and revisit that documentary, thinking about future and current cases rather than Letitia's case, which, as an expert witness, Dorothy Lewis absolutely shit the bed in. I mean, it was almost sad. She has worked very hard her entire life, but I feel like what they were pushing, they being her and her partner, Jonathan Pincus, and even Alex Gibney with that documentary. And I respect Alex Gibney more than most documentary filmmakers. I am a big fan of his for several reasons. Maybe not so much this one. This one hit a little too close to home because I watched it in preparation for Gannon's trial, and I was already too emotionally invested in the case. So I had a hard time seeing this documentary clearly because of the lens I was viewing it through. But anyway, she a lot. I think that a lot can be learned from her. It's just a tough study. It's a really tough study. But I feel like what they were pushing was, if not madness itself, I feel like they were pushing, what did they call it? Radical empathy. I think they called it radical empathy. And I get it, a little empathy is a good thing. But it gets dangerous when that empathy comes from you stepping, inside the brain of a woman who did what Letitia Stout did, and to this day is trying to pretend that she didn't or wasn't in her right mind. They absolutely proved it at trial that she was in her right mind. They went through everything that she did to cover up her crime, and they questioned Dorothy Lewis, like, so does that sound like somebody who's not in charge of their faculties? And then she did this. Does that sound like somebody who doesn't understand or know what she did and is trying to cover it up? I mean, it was just ridiculous. And somebody asked me recently, I think it was Jill, maybe. It was either Scout or Jill. Somebody asked me recently how much Dorothy Lewis was paid for her expert testimony at trial. And I just watched that part again today. So she thought she was getting paid $350 an hour plus $75 an hour for travel. And the defense believed that she was being paid $300 an hour. And as of trial, she had not been paid yet. So that's all I know on that. I don't know. At the end of that presentation that I played earlier, it got my attention. The part where it was clipped, I clipped it from the documentary, and it was Jonathan Pincus, which was Dorothy Lewis's partner. I believe he's passed now, but it was him, talking about how madness itself was punishment enough. And is it? I mean, especially when somebody like Letitia Stout is feigning madness. Is it punishment enough? I don't think it's enough punishment, but that's just me. I don't know. Let me look at my notes here. Oh, so she mentioned parasomnias. And I think that my response was something like, oh, great. Now we have another vocabulary word. Last week we had a few vocabulary words, right? Stippling, not stifling, stippling, which I will never screw up again. And I don't feel bad for doing it, but I do appreciate the feedback and the correction, because you guys know how I feel about learning as much as I can every day. Anyway, we also had confabulation and circumlocution, which we won't get back into tonight, but I think that our next vocabulary word is going to be parasomnias. Did you see how excited Dorothy Lewis got when she mentioned parasomnias, and like the idea that somebody could get away with murder if they could prove they did it in their sleep? So we'll definitely be exploring that more at some point, not because it had anything to do with Colorado's case against Letitia Stout, just because I find it interesting. And she also mentioned the words grotesquely abused. And that was something that they being the defense, that was something that the defense tried to put forward at trial, is that Letitia Stout had been grotesquely abused as a child, which led to her inability to control herself as an adult. And certainly in that moment during psychosis, according to Dorothy Lewis, it's because of this grotesque abuse that she suffered at the hands of her care providers as a child, which kind of places her, back to that radical empathy stuff. It places Letitia in the victim role. So the reason why Letitia grew up and murdered an 11-year-old child is because people were mean to her when she was a kid. She didn't talk about, being sexually abused to the point of intercourse. She didn't, her stories changed over and over again. The people that she accused were all deceased. These are all things that came up after she needed a homicide defense. And that's another thing that Dorothy Lewis talked about during her testimony at Letitia's trial, is that you can't I think it was retrospectively was the word that she used. I don't know. I'm not a friggin' scholar. But we'll say retrospectively. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. But it makes enough sense to get past this part. Anyway, Dorothy Lewis said that you can't retrospectively feign dissociative identity disorder. And, I guess I would agree with that. There were some examples going way back in Letitia Stout's history, like back when she was suing the school district who motioned to have her license revoked because she abandoned her post. And that's not how they phrased it. Anyway, one of the things that I noticed about Letitia back then was that she really liked to mess with her name, and certainly on legal documents. She's always been manipulative as hell. And so she would do things like when she was suing the Horry County School District, she spelled her own name wrong and used a last name that she didn't legally use anymore. But technically it was her name for part of the time while she was employed. She really likes to cover her tracks, that one. And that goes back to the idea that she is nowhere near as smart as she thinks she is, but she is a lot smarter than most people give her credit for. And then you fast forward to after she murdered her stepson. And the police, the responding officers, show up, at 10-something that night back on January 27th of 2020. And she tells them that her name is Tesha. Okay, now on the 911 call, she says that her name is Tisha. Her friends, family, everybody calls her Tisha, with the exception of her aunts who call her Tisha Lynn. I'm not sure what people called her in a professional setting, but I know that she tried to get colleagues and coworkers to refer to her as Dr. Stout, because she had an almost doctorate, an EDD from Jerry Falwell's Liberty University. Now, she didn't actually have her doctorate, because she never defended her dissertation. But she, of course, had some technical reason about how she submitted it later online. So technically she did it. And she even walked for graduation, which is something you pay to do at Liberty University. But, that's another thing I remember is the way Dorothy Lewis referred to Letitia Stauch's alleged doctorate degree. That was certainly a highlight of the trial for me. Anyway, why was I going down that particular rabbit hole? I'm not sure. But anyway, I know that at some point I was talking about how you can't retrospectively feign dissociative identity disorder. But everything that I can think of, other than some legal documents, is her telling stories after the crime was committed, when she needed to cover her tracks. She's always covered her tracks in various ways. The crime wasn't always murder, and the victim wasn't always a child. But I feel really bad for a gentleman that she used to work with that she charged, that she sued civilly along with the school district for sexual harassment. Kind of feels like, researching that case, it feels like he got suckered into it. He may not have behaved the way that he should, but he was drawn into a trap and preyed upon by a highly manipulative woman. And that's what Letitia Stauch has always been, according to my research. And, which is limited, but I feel strong enough in that being the truth to say it publicly. And anyway, what are some of the other things that she did? She had Dr. Lewis believing that her name was Leticia, because that's what some of the alleged alter personalities called her, was Leticia instead of Letitia or Tisha. She certainly didn't tell Dr. Lewis to call her Dr. Stauch. Can you imagine? Or maybe she did. I don't know. We haven't seen the full 14 hours, but I sure would like to. And a little more research on that. One copy belongs to the jail that was used by the defense, which is part of the, I guess, discovery. It's just not public. It's not a public part of the discovery. And also, Dorothy Lewis's son, Eric, has a copy because they filmed everything in hopes of making their own documentary film. So, I doubt that we will ever see it, nor do I think that a documentary from Dorothy Lewis about Letitia Stauch would be very well received by the public at all. I think it would actually cause torches and pitchforks at her Connecticut home, is what I think it would cause. I don't know. Let me check my other notes. Oh yeah, there's the note that says radical empathy. And there were several times where I did kind of try to follow Dorothy Lewis's, thought process, which I do not suggest. Like, don't try that at home. But one of the things that got my attention is when she was talking about, haven't you ever been driving in a car and you miss your exit? That's a form of dissociation. And that got my attention because, of course I've done that. I have also, in the distant past, had so much to drink that I lost memory. And I was conscious and functioning, but I have no memory of what occurred. And, had I committed a murder during a drunken blackout, would that keep me out of prison? Would that, would a jury of 12 people say, oh, she's not guilty because she didn't know what she was doing. She was legally insane in a drunken blackout. Yeah. And I understand that the person would probably never see freedom again. Either way, but, murder and manslaughter gets prison sentences. I mean, that's just what it gets. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were some people who are currently fighting against having this as a legal defense in the state of Colorado, not guilty by reason of insanity. It's not on the books in a lot of states. You're not even able to file it. There can still be competency proceedings, like with Lori Vallow. She was unable to plead not guilty by reason of insanity because they didn't have it. But she was, competency was raised on several occasions. And at one point she was found incompetent to stand trial, which means they put her in like some sort of intensive therapy with drugs usually, until she is able to comprehend that she is on trial for what she is accused of doing and what the consequences may be. So you could still do that, but I don't know. It'll be interesting. There are not many people in this live post-trial study group right now, which is fine. I do like the smaller groups, and we still have plenty of opportunity for for participation in the comment section after I make this video public tomorrow morning. So please, if you're on the replay crew, whether you are a paid member or a public viewer, let me know how you feel about that. I mean, how do you feel about all of it, really? Should Colorado or any other state even have not guilty by reason of insanity as a potential defense? Certainly in states that don't have capital punishment, kind of like the way bond had to be adjusted through legislation after Colorado repealed the death penalty. They had to make some changes because all of the sudden, because there was no capital punishment, anybody who committed any crime, capital crimes didn't exist anymore. So anybody and everybody was eligible for bond. And that is a frightening prospect. I mean, look, Kimberly Singler was in London for 2 years fighting extradition. Huge flight risk. Can you imagine if she was given a bond? But back then, and I might even still have a video. Yes, I do. It's just a little 2-minute clip I'm going to play. This is El Paso County 4th Judicial District Attorney Mike Allen. And this is him before Letitia went to trial, talking about what needed to happen at the state capitol now that the death penalty had been repealed.
Multiple elected district attorneys are sounding the alarm on a new Colorado Supreme Court ruling guaranteeing accused murderers the ability to bond out of jail.
And tonight, 13 Investigates has learned this new decision impacts nearly 36 ongoing cases in El Paso County. Investigative reporter Sean Rice joins us live in the studio to break down this controversial decision. Sean?
Yeah, Bart and Heather, 7 Supreme Court justices in our state have declared that people accused of deliberately killing another person now have the right to bail. The Supreme Court ruling says withholding an accused murderer's ability to bond out of jail is a direct violation of their rights.
We will have people that are charged with first-degree murder get out of custody on bond as a result of this opinion.
El Paso County District Attorney Michael Allen is concerned with the unintended consequences of a new state Supreme Court decision. 7 state Supreme Court justices ruled that because Colorado abolished the death penalty, holding a person charged with murder in jail on no bond is a, quote, abuse of the trial court's discretion.
Now people that are committing the most heinous offenses in a community, whereas we had been able to hold them without bond, meaning that we're going to stay in jail until the case was tried to a jury, are now going to have the chance to bond out of jail and be out in the community again.
The El Paso County DA's office is now having to set bond hearings for 34 first-degree murder cases that have not yet gone to trial. Cases like Joshua Johnson, who is charged with violently stabbing his teen coworker to death at a Rock Room in Walgreens. And the new bond rules are already playing out in courtrooms across the state. Nicholas Tumblin, who's accused of killing 2 people and nearly murdering another in 2021, this week, a Pueblo County judge granted him 2 $1 million bonds.
So these are dangerous people who are not afraid to carry out violence against others, including people that are apprehending them, and will be back out on the street potentially if the bond is low enough.
Allen believes the only way to change it would be through the state legislature passing a law to amend the Supreme Court decision.
Think there was any buy-in whatsoever from our legislature to do that?
Probably not.
Allen is calling on state lawmakers to study this issue and its potential negative impacts to public safety. That next legislative session reconvenes in January of next year. Reporting live in the studio, Sean Rice, 13 Investigates.
Okay, Sean, thank you.
So I just found that interesting. Something else that I want to mention before we get out of here, and I'm glad that we went ahead and kept it to under an hour this week, because I'm not as prepared as I would like to be for my 8 p.m. live stream. And during that live stream, we are going to be going over a basic timeline in Colorado's case against Kimberly Singler. Excuse me. Anyway, so that pretty much covers all of my notes. But the one final thing, and let me just go ahead and bring the YouTube up again here. And gonna go to my community wall. Whoops, not even sharing my screen. Bear with me, share screen. YouTube. Whoops, where is it? There it is. Good Lord, I'll get it figured out eventually. Okay. Okay, so if I go to the community wall, there's that little link that I was talking about with Nick Reiner. And then, of course, Kilo did some modeling yesterday. I could use some help with tech support and testing my store if anybody has time at any point. Maybe we'll maybe we'll do one more week on the insanity defense, and we'll get into the rest of Dorothy Lewis's book, which we started last week, along with that dissociative identity disorder textbook. So we'll go ahead and set that up for next week for the study group and see what happens. That's Kimberly Singler. There it is. Okay, here's what I wanted to talk to you about. Attorney General for the state of Colorado is 100% in his future and ours. And my immediate reaction to learning that District Attorney Mike Allen is actually going to be running for Attorney General in the state of Colorado. I was happy about that, but at the same time, and let me just change my screen. Uh-oh, I'm frozen. I was trying to do too much. Can you guys hear me? Let me try taking the comments off the screen. I think I just have way too much going on here. Oh, and Scout says, I just checked out the store and everything came up. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay, so I closed down some of my extra windows. I think that KRDO's website just takes a lot of juice. Anyway, let's just go ahead and watch.
Welcome to the Winter Zone at the Century Casino and Hotel in Cripple Creek, where the fun and excitement are as big as the winning. Explore our state-of-the-art slot machines, electronic table games, and video poker bars. Our delicious mid-city grill.
Oh boy. Well, okay, we're not.
And exceptional bars serve up your favorite food and drinks.
Maybe
The
get one
Century
more
Casino
chance?
Hotel lets you stretch an exciting visit into an unforgettable stay. And membership in the Winter Zone lets you enjoy a little more of everything. Just call or click to find out more. So come up, stay, play, and win at the Century Casino and Hotel in Cripple Creek.
O'clock, we're learning that El Paso County District Attorney, I should say 4th District Attorney Michael J. Allen, is now running for Colorado's Attorney General seat. That's according to state records. DA Allen oversees the 4th Judicial District in Teller and El Paso counties. He's running as a Republican, facing off against Hital Doshi, Michael Doherty, Jenna Griswold, and David Seligman, all Democrats. As Attorney General, the next electee will oversee the legal interests of the people of Colorado, including consumer protection cases and the prosecution of statewide crime rings. Now to the
It seems like that's where it cuts off. That's the first time I've done that, adding somebody else's website with a whole bunch of activity. I probably won't do that anymore, but I just wanted to tell you guys about Mike Allen running for running for Attorney General for the state of Colorado, which of course I am going to vote for him, but it leaves me concerned about who's next. The 4th Judicial District is my home district, and that's where I live, and it's where I plan on living for quite some time. So I don't know who will take his place, but I hope that it is someone of equal or better caliber, because Mike Allen has been an amazing district attorney. And that's really all I wanted to share. I do notice that I had this in the studio, and then we'll get out of here in just under an hour. But so this is a sample of a bunch of Letitia's signatures that I grabbed from various places. And these are all, of course, after the homicide. There was really no proof at all that she was pulling this Janelle, Taylor, Tisha, T, Victoria. My God, I have a whole list of all of the fake names. Are they fake names or are they alternate personalities? Anyway, this is her feigning mental illness and dissociative identity disorder. And even though Dorothy Lewis was unable to give any example of her using a different name or whatever, that's when that whole thing came up about whether or not she had notes in her bag and whether or not she was able to present them during trial, because she thought she had something somewhere where somebody may have said that at one point in the past, a long time ago, Tisha might have used the name Maria, which was allegedly her most violent personality and the one who killed Gannon. And by the way, the only confession that we get from Letitia, even though it's an affirmative defense, is her with a fake-ass Russian accent talking to Dorothy Lewis on 2 separate cameras with her defense attorney and private investigator behind her, saying that Maria thought that there was a threat, and because Gannon was standing on the bed, he seemed much larger and scarier than he really was. And so Maria shot him, she thinks. That was the closest we ever came to a confession, and it's the closest we will probably ever come. That's not how the autopsy showed that he was killed. You know, he was definitely stabbed first before being shot in the jaw from a downward, or from an upward angle. So she would have been shooting up at him through his jaw. Right? That's the way the bullet went through. And so her, after having 2 years to look at the state's discovery evidence, came up with this crazy story in a Russian accent about how Maria shot him through the jaw while he was standing on the bed because he was scary, he was a threat, and Maria is the enforcer. She's the deadly personality that protects all the people who can't protect themselves. You mean like Gannon? Oh God, it was so frustrating, and it really did affect me to watch this woman pretend that somehow a fake case of dissociative identity disorder was going to keep her out of prison after what she did to that innocent, precious little boy. I will never forget this case. I'm still not done with this case. And I hope to take everything that I've learned from this case, and I'm still learning today from Colorado's case against Letitia Stout. I hope to take it all with me into, these new cases, specifically Kimberly Singler, which I am going to go live about in approximately 1 hour and 4 minutes. And Scout threw up she threw those blue hearts up there. And yeah, I will definitely never forget Gannon. Thank you for being a part of the post-trial study group. I know it was a small group this week. Hopefully we continue to grow. Hopefully the website, I'll be able to continue bringing that up to a place where it is a solid source of valid, verified information on a bunch of Colorado cases. It needs a lot of work, but I get a little bit more done every week. And I have people who are helping me now. So it's all greatly appreciated. You are greatly appreciated. And Scout, once again, thank you for checking on the merchandise stuff. I thought that I had the link wrong on the website. So thank you very much. And I will hopefully see you guys in about an hour. And if not, I will see you for another post-trial study group session next Saturday at 6 p.m. Mountain. Have a good night.